Fireboards. We're gonna talk about fireboards and all of the details that you're gonna wanna pay attention to. So when it comes to fireboards, we first wanna think about material harvesting. And oftentimes it's really easy just to make a kit out of all the same material. So if it's a cedar kit, you have a cedar spindle and a cedar fireboard. Balsam fir, same. If that is not the case, you just want to consider the fact that if your spindle is denser than your fireboard, it's more apt to drill down and through your board without giving you enough dust and heat to produce that coal. So it's better to have a board that's slightly denser than your spindle. All this to be said that you really want to pay attention when material harvesting. Again, you want to make sure it's not rotten. You know, if it's from a lower section of a tree closer to the ground, or if it's a branch, they can tend to be denser. So you still have to pay attention to those small details, even if you're harvesting from the same tree. But generally, it's a good to go equation. So when we have our fireboard, there are a few things we want to pay attention to. So we talked about how we have cedar kits that we split out for students often, and this is kind of a standard fireboard. It's long enough that we can comfortably put our foot on it when we're utilizing it. We have this nice clean 90-degree edge on one side that aligns with where our socket is closer to, and that it sits flat on the ground. I can't emphasize the importance enough of this sitting flat on the ground. If it doesn't, it creates this wobble while you're working, and that wobble really pulls away. It detracts from the effort that you're putting forth to try and get a coal. So this table is pretty flat. It requires this fireboard to be pretty flat. The ground, you have a little bit more variability in which the ground will cushion that fireboard often. So you just want to pay attention to carving your fireboard so it sits flat, but also when you're bowing, making sure that it's not wobbling around. The thickness of the fireboard matches the spindle. So we're still looking at 3/4 of an inch. Nice and easy thing to remember. If you're harvesting from the landscape, so here we have this balsam fir kit. Here we have a balsam fir. This is part of the tree, so the lower section of the tree, and it's thicker. And it was just thick enough, again, about 3/4 of an inch here in thickness, that we had enough space and width in which we could burn our socket in and then carve our notch. And then you can see on the bottom, not much is done to carve it flat, so it sits flat, but the ground is soft enough that it's going to cushion it and that this didn't wobble. Hopefully you put in enough practice. Your fireboard looks like this. But I think the things that you really want to pay attention to is that you have a board that's long enough, that it's comfortable, it sits flat. And just like side tip, just avoid putting your sockets on the very end when you get them started and you start burning into them. But we're going to talk a lot more about sockets and really good ways of carving those notches when we get to that.